Hank B here with Josh T, and we are our
Our
Two
Two
Cents
Cents
Media.
Media.
And of course, with us today, we have Cameron F., who's here for the part 2 of our talk about Diablo 4 and the beta that they had. It's kind of like a preview of what's to come. In our part 2 today, we're going to be talking about the gameplay of the demo, the maps, the events, and kind of how we felt about the combat system. And this to give Josh a chance to kind of fill it out since he didn't get a chance to play it, and we're kind of like going, "Hey, Josh, you should play this." One
Not what you said when
interesting.
you played that beta.
I like the beta. What are you talking about?
I know you
But
didn't
one
say, "Hey,
interesting.
Josh, you should play it."
I had a
No
short
invite.
window of time to play it. So one interesting side note is I was reading an article today that said that the two most played classes in the beta were the Necromancer and the Sorcerer. Which is interesting because Cameron had a Necromancer. So we're going to give this over to Cameron, let him start talking about the first mission and kind of about the gameplay and how he felt about it.
Yeah, so it was a good way of doing how Diablo starts off its storylines. Of course, we're all familiar with 2 and 3. Some of our more experienced viewers may have played Diablo 1 and had seen the start of that. But again, you start off as a lone wanderer. You're introduced to a cutscene that uses in-game graphics pretty early. My gamma setting was entirely messed up, so to me, it looked horrible. But I would assume it looks very good if your gamma settings don't get messed up. Your character starts off getting lost in the woods, and you make your way through a blizzard to the first town. Of course, this is where we're first introduced to combat. Simple point and click on the bad guy and hope he blows up before he kills you. You unlock your first ability after you get your first level, and then you go on with the story. Story has you help in a small town, which is kind of cool. Kind of gives us that whole start, help and protect the innocent. That's what we always did in Diablo, right? Right? Hank, back me up here.
I guess. I mean, sure they were innocent.
We get sent out into some more open world before we encounter our first experience at dungeons. Dungeons are, again, the larger, in-depth underworld that we go through to try and find our loot, fight our enemies, and progress on our quests and level up. This one is a little interesting because it starts off with very, very few enemies for a good portion of the beginning of the dungeon, and then you're suddenly attacked by swarms of, fallen, which are the basic demons that we have all smashed and bashed and shot and killed and casted spells at for who knows how many ages. You fight your first boss fight, and we're introduced to a really cool mechanic when we fight this boss, which is, again, the very first boss we're encountering for Diablo 4. And they introduced a mechanic of health orb or potion spawns on sections of the boss. So their health bars will have these little ticks, which what we saw from 2 to 5 on the various bosses that we encountered, right, Hank?
Yeah, 2 to 5. I don't think I saw anything greater than that, and I don't think I saw less than that, but I was speedrunning again, so...
Yeah, it's true. So we, do our damage to the boss. The boss hits the first tick and drops a bunch of health orbs for us to go pick up in case we're playing either melee build and we're up in the fray getting our butts kicked as we're kicking butt, or in case we're playing a range build and we're off a little far and we get hit off of a stray shot. First boss fight ends pretty quickly. Even as it's the first boss, it's not horrible for any ranged build. Barbarians and melee druids and rogues had a bit of an issue from what I understood. But once we finish with that, we move on back to the town, only to find out, these weren't really very friendly townfolk. After all, it's an evil cult! And this is what introduces the big bad for the series, which is Lilith, mother of sanctuary, mother of fear, pain, blah, 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 all the dark stuff. And we are shown a cutscene of Lilith interacting with other people for the first time. And of course, we've seen Lilith in the opening trailer, but we didn't get a whole lot from her afterwards. So this is our first real big introduction to her as the evil antagonist. From there, we're encouraged to move on to find a hermit and he progresses us through the rest of the storyline. At this point, we're introduced to another new mechanic, which is gathering resources across the map.
Yeah, I actually like that. I did. I like the element of the gathering resources. I play a lot of survival games with crafting elements, and like the idea of gathering resources is kind of fun for me. I don't want to do it exclusively, but having them there I felt was a really cool extra element to the world itself and the maps themselves.
It was definitely neat because it added more purpose to going out and exploring versus just powering through the quest line and then going back into that grind setting like we learned in Diablo 3.
Yeah.
So, we were probably going to see a lot more. We only saw maybe like 6 total nodes, 3 or 4 different plants that we could gather, and
There was like a list. There was like a whole list on each different category of stuff that's going to be in the world.
yeah, there's like 3 or 4 different plants we could find out in the wild, and 2 different metal nodes. Everyone who's played a Blizzard game is familiar with metal nodes. But the neat thing is, if you look a little bit more at that list, we found out that a lot of creatures actually dropped extra material. And the purpose of those materials we'll get into a little bit later in this video, or it might need to be for part 3 if we don't get to it. But after we go through and help this hermit, we're moved on to the beginning of the first city. As the quests progress and we find out that we're in a slightly different Diablo than where we left off. It doesn't really seem like the events of Diablo 3 fully took place as far as what these people are concerned with so far. We're obviously in a different section of Sanctuary than we have been for the first 3 Diablo games, which is kind of cool. It is really neat to see these cities, or the main city, the one that we are introduced to in the beta in the first place. It's large.
Is there a Deckard Cain?
There is no Deckard Cain here.
At least not that we know of.
Stay a while and listen, and I'll tell you more.
I mean, it is the demo. He might have been around. There was a lot of quests that were unable to be continued because it was the demo.
Yeah, we'll probably still run into Deckard Cain's notes.
Yeah.
If there is still a Deckard Cain in this world, as we know, he does die in 3. Big spoiler, sorry.
I mean, does anybody really die in a video?
But we are introduced to this very large world, very large town. It in itself is about as big as some of the open area maps we saw in Diablo 3, which is really neat. The whole thing is fleshed out, so it's not just one big courtyard with like 4 or 5 vendors. There's plenty of different vendors and even new mechanics that we can actually interact with across the entire townscape itself. We progress on our quest line there, and then we're led out into a vast open world. What was previously just a linear path now becomes the bottom section of our map that we're accessing in the beta, and we have huge regions that go outward that we could go explore, which was really neat. There were no real load screens transferring zones. It wasn't like, okay, I cleared all of the Forgotten Woods, time to go on to Evil Demon Marsh. Okay, and now we're going to Desert of Despair. Yes.
I think I went into 4 different zones without ever actually completely clearing them, but completely clearing them actually unlocks other stuff for you, which was cool. But yeah, you definitely are getting all around the world.
Yeah, there's actually a neat feature for sticking to these zones, Josh, that we wanted to actually touch on, which was zone achievements.
Well, before we get into that, Josh, do you have any questions maybe about the nodes for like the gathering or like stuff that you're gathering off of creatures and things like that? Like, do you have any questions about what we've gone over so far?
I mean, it sounds kind of standard in games nowadays, gathering stuff, and I'm not sure if you're gathering wood or planks or whatever. I'm not sure if you could build a house or what everything.
I think that was in there.
Or...
That would be awesome if you could have your own house. I've been calling for that in almost every game I play that doesn't have it, but I don't think that element at least is there yet. Who knows in the future? But I just wanted to give you a chance to ask questions before we maybe got into talking a little bit more about the maps and the achievements that Chappie was about to bring up.
I think I'm good so far. I mean, everything sounds a little bit more involved from the previous two, especially the giant poo 3 was. So it's sounding pretty good.
Okay.
Continue.
Chap, you want to, or Cameron, you want to go ahead and go forward with the talking about the achievement part?
Yeah, so the achievements were actually a really neat introduction. We're all familiar with achievements in video games, and it's usually just hey, you did this thing, congratulations, player! Um, in the case of some of the Diablo games, or at least in Diablo 3, completing some of the achievements got us a nice little chunk of experience and a couple of little resources for upgrading our gear or using specialty vendors. Diablo 4 does Diablo 4 does more of the same thing. However, we're actually rewarded with things such as bonus skill points, which is pretty cool, considering that we are going to be expecting a level cap as well um, in the full game for leveling up our skills and talents. So the skill points off the achievements will be nice. You'll be able to flesh out your character a bit more. And from what we can tell, the achievements, a lot of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them are just kill multiple enemies in quick succession within a certain time period. Or explore X amount of cellars, which cellars are, as everybody is more aware, the smaller kind of 1 or 2 room dungeons that exist in the Diablo universe. Just quick, go in, bash everything, run out, loot caves.
Thought those were sex dungeons.
Just the ones you frequent. I will say.
That was a good one.
I will say there are a couple of other things that get added into these achievement lists. One of them are the statues of Lilith, which were pretty neat. They're just statues dedicated to the bad guy that are scattered across the map, hidden in plain sight in some cases. Interacting with them gives you a large portion of XP, and there is something that you get for getting all of them. We didn't really obviously get access to that in the full beta. But once the game comes out as a whole, we'll be able to see more of what we can find off of these little statues, what they give us, and things like that. Josh, do you have any questions about stuff like the achievements and anything going forward with the exploration?
No, I mean that all sounds pretty Diablo-esque. You know, exploration, kill stuff, loot stuff, find secret passageways, or so.
Well, what's cool about like them adding all these elements as opposed to the previous Diablos is that it's adding more to the game without taking away from it, and it's keeping you more engaged. For people who don't like just like I've said before, just the barbarian whirlwinding across the map, everything's dead, you're done with the mission. Like now, there's more reasons to actually explore now, and now you got the achievements, now you've got the resources, and like it's actually worth it to want to go out into the world to look around, which I think is a bonus.
Right.
So, anything else on the achievements or some of the map elements so far, chap?
I think a couple of things I do want to go over really quickly on that as far as the map goes. Remind me, in part 1, did we discuss how beautiful this game looks graphically?
I think we kind of mentioned it, but go ahead and go over it. I think we talked about a little bit about the character art, but I don't think we talked about the map art and like the city art. So why don't you go ahead and get into that?
Yeah, that's actually something that I'm really excited to talk about because the map art is phenomenal. Diablo 3's wasn't bad. It was, of course, static, randomly generated tiles placed all over, mix and match to give us the environment we're in. That was neat for the first couple of times we went through and ran through, but then it became hard to go back and repeat the quests because it wasn't always in the same spot.
Yeah.
Granted, that is what makes Diablo Diablo. Dungeon crawlers of all sorts follow that same mechanic. But with Diablo 4, it almost feels more like a MMO map, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The regions are set, the map tiles are set. The only couple of things that I know to be random are certain cellar locations will rotate. And of course, the resource spawns will scatter throughout the map and rotate through. But graphically, though, the map looks so much nicer as a solid piece. We are, in the beta at least, we're starting in the middle of winter, from what I can tell, in this region. And our first, hour or so gameplay, we're in the middle of a blizzard. and it literally looks like a blizzard as you have snow flurry going across your screen.
Oh,
You're,
we know what a blizzard looks.
oh yeah, your line of sight's kind of dimmed a bit. You don't really get to see much further. Ooh, excuse me, much further than your character can. Once that clears up, though, you can see the heavy laden snow. If you look close enough, you can even see your character's footsteps in said snow. Granted, games have been doing that for ages now. This is the first time we've seen some of these environmental things in Diablo that weren't just, oh, your character walked through a puddle of water, now he's on stone. There's your little wet, tiny feet prints all over. The environment actually feels more natural.
Yeah.
Feels almost like you're looking at a. I'm lost for words here. Not quite a painting, but just it feels like art. Walking through an art piece is how I would really put it. They put in a lot of effort into the detail.
And I really like the maps for what they are. I mean, they're not boring maps. I do like this, fixed map with the dungeons being randomized on the inside. I mean, I really hated that on some of the other games where, like you said, one time you go do the mission, well, the cave's right next to where you got to go. The next time it's clear across the map, and it does make it a little hard sometimes to try to get in, get out, and get your game on. You know.
Yeah.
So I do agree. The maps are really, I think, are really a step up and are better than what they have been in the past.
This also does help with the event spawns for the game. We're all familiar with the running across the events in the open world where you have to complete this quick time objective, and then it's done and you're good and you get your rewards with certain things to do to bump the event rewards up.
This was interesting.
Yeah. For 4, from what we can tell, there are a number of locations that are always where an event spawns. Granted, the event...
But you can tell by a circle on the map that you're getting close. So if you're not wanting to do it, don't go into the gold circle.
Yeah, you get a little indicator on your mini-map showing, hey, the event's in this area. It's always centered on the start of the event, so you don't have to really worry about trying to find the activator. Just go to the center of the circle if you really want to do it, or skirt around, as Hank said, if you want to avoid doing the event as a whole, which there's really not a whole lot of reason to skip events unless you're low on health, your inventory's full, or you just plain old don't want to do it. So it's not like there's going to be an event that's solely going to kick your butt. Something they did that was neat with these is they introduced the mastery of doing these events, which is the way to unlock them for their harder difficulty or increased rewards. In Diablo 3, to me, the masteries that they did do, or the ways to improve your reward that they did do, didn't really change the event very much. However, in 4, there are a couple where if you manage to do the particular task you need to do, it was great. The reward was better, but the event itself changed. You either didn't have to fight massive waves, or you did, depending on which event it is. Anybody can join in on these events too, because with, again, how the maps are set up, feeling like an MMO, other players can wander into the same event space and participate, and you still get your rewards even if you don't clear part of the map off with a big explosion.
That happened with us a couple times when we were running, trying to get it up. We did a couple events where people joined us.
Yeah, and one of them, they carried us. Like, we just happened to be in the area and hit 1 or 2 minions, but we still got a good chunk of reward out of it because the bonus objective had been met, the timetable had been met, so it just was kind of interesting. So you can still benefit just from being there.
And just to add on, they're not all cookie cutter. It's not like it's the same event in different spots where it's go find the boss, kill and kill the minions. It's like this one it has its own puzzle to get done. This one's a wave one. This one you got to kill certain people within a certain time. Like the elements were different for each event, so it's not like if you do one event, you've done them all. So it's worth like going and trying them and seeing what the different elements are. And there might be some you like and some you don't.
Yeah, that was very nice because while the setup may have been the same, again, what you encountered was always something slightly different. I will say I do have an absolute favorite event zone so far from what we experienced in the demo, and there's this old abandoned castle that you have to go through to clear out a bunch of enemies. Now, we're all familiar with the varied levels in Diablo where you can go up and down in certain sections of the map and still see the rest of the parts of the map. This castle is one said section, but it introduces us again to a new mechanic in Diablo games, which is a traversal mechanic. So you have things such as scaling the side of the castle to climb up inside on the ruined walls, or jumping across a large gorge to get from one section of broken battlements to the other. There's even a small little section where you can ride a zip line across an open gap in front of the front gate. That one I don't
Which you
quite
chased
get.
me away from.
Yeah, I just tried to direct tank the away because he thought he was getting down and it was just taking him further in.
Yeah.
But these elements are incorporated into the event area and into your combat because the enemy will still try and shoot you if they're a ranged champion, or they're sitting on another section of the map that you can't get to unless you traverse this way. So it's good at adding depth to the combat and the maps itself, as well as giving you a little bit more to do. And such traversal methods are actually scattered around. In certain sections, you have to like do a small little jumping puzzle that you're gonna make it. You're never gonna fall, but it's still cool to see.
So
Yeah.
before we get to the next topic, the last topic for this really, Josh, any questions about like the events or the map itself, and how like they interact with each other, or any comments
I
you want to
mean,
make at this point?
what he's talking about, the beauty of the graphics and the traversing and certain missions and how missions kind of change and stuff. I think sounds pretty cool. And it's not something that I don't think I've seen in Diablo, so I'm interested in seeing it, especially with, the events. I mean, Diablo 2 didn't have very many of them. I think when I played 3, I don't think they introduced those quite yet. But I didn't get to. I mean, I beat 3, but that was about it. I wanted to just beat the garbage and then throw it away.
So as we get into wrapping up our part 2 here, overall, Cameron, how did you feel about the combat as it related to the maps and how you moved around? I mean, did you feel the combat was smooth? Did you feel there's a lot of area that needs work? Just you played two different characters, and again, both those characters were different than mine. But how did you feel about the combat system?
Overall, the combat system still feels very Diablo, which is what it should feel like. That is neither negative or a positive in this regard because it's supposed to feel like what it is. With the way the maps are set up, with the height advantages, the traversing, it makes it a bit more challenging on certain missions. Again, like if I have to get to the other side of a castle and I can only get that way by hitting various jump puzzles in time, um, it's not a bad thing. It actually gives it a little bit more of a challenge to it, which is a positive. Um, Graphically, the combat is a lot smoother. We're not looking at a million large effects from both monsters and players. A lot of the effects have either been dumbed down a little bit as far as how bright they are or how large the affected visual is, which made it easier to find the enemy and to find my teammate and to see what was going on. So far, loot is also not just exploding out of everybody's heads like pinatas like they did in Diablo 3. So I'm not accidentally picking up 5 million yellow swords when I'm just trying to hit the treasure goblin.
Yeah.
Overall, I'd say it's a lot smoother than Diablo 3, and it feels more akin to Diablo 2, where it is more direct, finish the fight, clear the area, keep going, with what you're trying to accomplish. Whereas Diablo 3 was just like, oh, did you explore the whole map and blow up every last loot crate, enemy, and random object in the game? Congratulations. It was smoother. It was much smoother.
Yeah,
That was a big improvement.
I will agree with that. I didn't feel the combat was clunky at all, and it still felt like Diablo. I felt the enemies, whilst they had enemies that had range, you weren't bombarded by like the whole dungeon had like range attacks at you, which could make it hard for melee characters. I felt like the balance was a little bit better between the melees and the range enemies. Like you said with the height, like there was one time we were doing the dungeon, you're taking the main road. I just went up a staircase and I'm just like shooting across because in that instance, the height was able to let me do that, and it was beneficial. We weren't like in each other's way. So I think the combat's really well done, and it still feels like Diablo while also improving upon Diablo.
Yeah, definitely a big uptake from 3, both visually and interactive, which was good. It was very good.
So Josh, go ahead.
Nope, that was it. I was going to say,
Okay. Josh, any questions about the combat as we have been talking about before you've had a chance to watch the video?
I mean, no questions, but more of interest. I mean, I'm very interested in seeing the lack of effects that happen when you cast spells and stuff. Because I've played a lot of games like that, especially like Ark or Diablo 3 or and other MMOs where the effects just get way too overwhelming for your screen. You lose sight of your character or where your teammate is or where the enemies are. You don't even know what you're shooting anymore just because all these flashy effects are just too much. And I'm kind of glad they dumbed them down and made flashy where it might needs to be flashy and what needs to be small is small. So kind of that's what I'm liking right there.
Okay.
That's one thing that kind of really pisses me off on some of those MMOs. When you lose sight of yourself, your friends, it's like, hey, I'm over here. Where?
Yeah, it's really
All I see
hard
is
when
a
you have
of explosions.
no concept of what's going on in the battle, and you're just standing there like, what's going on? Like Fallout 76 has that problem at times too, depending upon the player. But yeah, no, it's definitely better when you can still follow along and feel like you're still being part of the combat instead of just like having to wait for the screen to calm down before you can go, oh, I died. What the hell killed me because I couldn't follow anything?
yeah, definitely.
So I think that's Oh, go ahead, Chappie.
I was just commenting in. Definitely cleaner.
Well, I think that's a good spot to end part 2 on. We'd like to hear your 2 cents because this has been our 2 cents. We will be coming back with a part 3, which these guys didn't know about, which I'm adding on, where because of how long we talked about this part, where we're going to talk a little bit more on the inventory and the loot system, at least what was presented to us. That should be a little bit smaller conversation because we're just going to really talk about those couple of topics to finish up our preview of the Diablo demo. And then part 4 will be after Josh, I can never get this straight, Josh watches some videos and is able to get a glance at some of the stuff we've been talking about. So, let us know what you think.